right, so you guys have been waiting for me to do almond nails, and today I'm going to show you guys how to do an almond nail shape. I am going to use my fake hand here because I just did my nails for the Premiere Orlando show, so I don't want to ruin them. So I am going to show you guys how to do an almond nail shape on my little half hand here, which I know creeps some of you guys out, but it's awesome for practicing. I also have an artificial nail tip on here, so this little spot right here is actually just a glue bubble on the actual silicone finger. Just ignore that for the purposes of this video. I also have my nail form on, and you're going to apply your nail form very similarly to how you're going to do a stiletto, except when we apply the gel, I actually fall short of the pointy area because I really just want to have kind of a rounded shape. So rather than taking it all the way to the point, I usually shorten my form just enough so it goes to the length that I want. So I'm going to actually use this line here on my nail form to extend the product to, which is 1, 2, 3 out from the nail. And you can adjust this if you want to. You can pinch it closer or you can do it longer. But with a stiletto, we do it all the way to the point. With an almond, we want to keep that rounded and we want to keep a little bit less pinched. So I'm going to fall short of just maybe like one space from where I have the form pinched at, okay? I also already have prepped this, so do all of your nail prep, put your base coat on, or a bonder if your system uses a bonder. And I'm going to be using the same Astemio Clear Zero Heat Gel for this. This stuff is really awesome, and it's also a soak-off product, so if you guys want to be able to do your nails without worrying about soaking it off or using hard gel, this is a good option for you. It's a good builder. Okay, so as always, I am going to apply a wet layer here. And I do like to do like one thin coat over the entire nail surface. I just find that makes everything a little bit more seamless. And you can put a big dollop on, or you can just do kind of like a wet layer here to get kind of everything going. And then I want to create my extension first. So I'm just going to roll off some gel close to where the nail meets the nail form, and then I'm just going to make sure I cover those corners like I've shown you in both of my previous videos about nail shapes. Make sure that's all completely done. We want to make sure that this attaches really well. You can even blend it up into the nail a little bit. And then general length and shape. And you know, I usually go a little bit past. I want it to be super thin so I can file it off, but I always go a little bit past where I need. That way I have some space to maneuver if I do need to file. It's better to go a little bit past what you need than right on the dot because you want to have some room. Okay, so just make sure everything's nice and connected. And then once you've got everything nice and connected and you've got that general shape on the nail form, go ahead and flash cure it for about 15 seconds. Now I'm going to take this out and I'm going to pinch it slightly, just a little bit to kind of perfect the shape and tuck these sidewalls in. I'm just using a pair of nail art tweezers. You can use a pinching tool if you want, but I find that the pinching tools that have a triangle shape, I like tweezers because it's a much more of a gentle pinch, which is what we need for gel. With the pinching tools, sometimes they can be a little bit too aggressive, the ones that really clamp down. So I like to just use tweezers. You can also use your fingers if you want to, but I like to use tweezers because it gives me more of a symmetrical pinch. I always tend to over pinch on one side. So just a gentle squeeze and then down and then fully cure. All right, so I have my nail fully cured. I'm just gonna press into the nail form really close to the gel on both sides and release that nail form, and then tip the nail form down and pull that away, and you've got your general length and shape of the nail you're going to create. Obviously this is too thin. We need to build up the body of the nail. We need to add an apex to it. So I'm going to do that now before I file the final shape. So I am going to do a wet layer again. And I find that by doing just these 2 wet layers, it gives me enough product at the cuticle and the sidewall areas, and so I don't have to worry about adding any more. And doing the wet layer or the slip layer technique, make sure that you've got a nice slippery surface. That way any additional gel that you put on the nail is going to self-level very nicely. Okay, so I'm going to put a nice big dollop on this nail. I usually put it right here, not close to the cuticle area because I don't need to put any product there. I really need to focus right on my apex. So I usually put the gel there And then I tip the finger down slightly while I'm working so everything starts to run towards the tip. If you run out of product, go back, grab a little bit more, press into the gel that you already have, and I'm just barely touching this nail, just like that, okay? I'm gonna hurry up and cure this. Now, I wanted to show you guys something that's important because this is often the part that people struggle with, because putting a big dollop of gel on the nail often leads to a heat spike. When gel cures, one of the residual things that come out of the chemical reaction is heat. It's called the exothermic reaction. And this heat obviously is uncomfortable, but we also want to be able to work with the amount of gel that we want to work with. We don't want to have to sacrifice our speed of application when we're working on ourselves or on someone else. So I wanted to show you really quick how you guys can work with this so that you're able to use the amount of gel that you want. You're able to use a big dollop, but you also don't have to worry about heat when you cure your hand in your lamp. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make, I'll show you the wrong way to do it first. The wrong way to do it is to flash cure and then put it out, and flash cure and put it out, and flash cure and put it out. This doesn't give this gel enough of a break from the light in order to slow down the process. So this is how I always train my clients how to do it, and I do train my clients before we ever put any product on their nails. I like to go through this process and make sure that they feel comfortable with the process, that they understand what they're going to do with their hands before I start putting any gel on their hand, okay? So what I have my clients do is they put their hand all the way into the lamp for a second, they come out, and they turn their hand all the way upside down. The reason why is when they are taking a break, the gel obviously is not fully cured. I want to keep this gel centered in the center of the nail. I don't want it to slide into the sidewalls. So by having them turn their hand upside down, it keeps the gel centered. And having them turn their hand upside down also makes sure that they take a complete break from the light. They're not able to jut their hand in and out. So by having them put their hand in slowly, 1001, take it out, turn it upside down, it ends up being about a 3 to 4 second break from the light, which ends up being just about perfect. And this is something that a lot of my nail buddies use. This is a technique that's very popular throughout Europe, and I know my friend Selena uses this technique. It's a very smart way to get people to take a full break from the UV light, and also to make sure that your gel stays exactly where you want it to be. So you can do that. And I also have my clients just repeat the process. So you can do it one of two ways. You can use the motion sensor on your light so that it turns on when they put their hand in the light. There's usually sensors on either side, and once that's broken, the light turns on. Or you can just turn it on for 30 seconds and then have them do their thing, turn upside down, in, turn upside down, in, turn upside down. And I have them do this for the full 30 seconds. And while this is happening, I'm working on another finger on their other hand. So basically, as soon as I'm done applying product to the other hand, I switch, and then I would proceed with this nail or this nail, whichever one I'm going on to, okay? So have them do that. And as you guys have seen in my gel polish application videos and a lot of my previous videos, I like to do one finger at a time. It allows me to get a perfect application on every single finger. And if I'm constantly flipping back and forth between hands, then I'm always working on something, and it doesn't add any time to my appointment. It actually, in my opinion, shaves off time because I get a better preliminary application. I have less rework and filing to do, and it just makes my job a lot easier. And training yourself or training your clients how to flash cure really will help you be faster at your application and, avoid a lot of mistakes. And a lot of you guys, when you're first doing this, you get confused because you put your hand in, you turn it upside down, but you don't put your hand in upside down. You just turn your hand back over again, put it in, take it out, flip it over, and just have it be a nice, smooth, controlled motion. You don't have to rush, just keep going. And it'll really help take off that exothermic reaction. It'll really help mitigate that heat. So this is a great way to be able to apply your product, okay? I'm gonna squeegee off the gel on my brush. And I always use a wipe to do this. I never use my fingers. I always just lightly wipe off my brush and put it back into a nice point. And then I can put the cap back on. Also, after you're done using your gel, always put the lid back on. And while I'm working, I typically, while I'm even like, messing around with things, or let's say I go to do something else, I always have the lid handy and I just put the lid on top of it. One of the best habits that you can form for yourself is to always grab things by the bottom and never by the lid. That goes also for any bottles that you have on your table. So if you have a bottle on your table, always pick it up by the bottle, not by the lid. Because if you do have things that are loose that you're working with, if you just go to grab it by the lid, a lot of times this will fling and spill everywhere. So a really, really good technique is always grab everything by the base of it. And that way it doesn't matter if the lid is secure, you can always secure it later. But I do keep my gels covered, and then when I'm done using my gel, I always put the lid back on and store it. That way I don't get any UV light on my gels. Okay, so I have my nail here cured and ready to go. Now I'm going to take off the uncured gel that's on the surface, which is called the inhibition layer. And I'm just gonna really saturate this, scrub back and forth. You can scrub on the nail surface, but I always pull away from the skin. Don't rub everything up into the skin because we don't want to get any uncured product up onto the person's skin. So always just scrub, 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 and pull straight down like so. Now I am ready to file the nail. And I am going to get into how to e-file everything, but I want to show you guys hand filing techniques first because it's really important to understand how to hand file a nail before you get into e-filing, because e-filing, essentially the only difference between a hand file and an e-file, okay, is that an e-file spins round, right? So this is basically the same type of surface as a nail file. Not this particular bit, but the idea is, imagine I was able to wrap this nail file around a bit and spin it. That's exactly what we do with an e-file. So hand filing is a very, very important skill to have. And if you're ever stuck without power or something like that, you can still work even if you don't have your e-file. If your battery runs out, whatever, you can still keep working, which I think is very smart to have in your back pocket. Okay, so Almond, same as last time, we're gonna file the sidewalls. And filing a silicone hand is a little bit more challenging. It's a little bit more wiggly. I should really start calling my fake hand Lazy Susan because she's quite lazy and she doesn't hold her hand steady for me. Okay, so we want to do the sidewalls of the nail. This is not the sidewall necessarily. This I consider kind of the extension wall or the extension sidewall. When we do sidewalls, we really want to talk about just this area here on the sides because we want to just keep this very streamlined from the real nail out onto the extension. Okay, so I usually keep this very, very straight. My nail file is straight to the sidewall and I'm just filing this area here. I'm not doing the part underneath. Then when I'm ready to move on, I would do, for example, I would do this side on this finger, then move to this side on this finger and continue through all 10 nails, then come back on the opposite side. You want to keep that symmetry and that cohesiveness with your filing technique. And then when you're done with sidewalls, you can turn the nail to the side. And now I can work on, for example, this side and now this side. And then I can go through all 10 nails and then have my customer flip their hand, or I can flip my own hand and do the other side as well. Okay, so I do everything the same on all the nails before you switch positions. It'll help you be more consistent. As you guys have seen in my previous videos, even with an almond nail, okay, even though this is going to swoop up into a rounded point, we still want to make sure that this sidewall right here connects to our real sidewall. So don't go filing crazy notches into it and trying to get this tapered. We taper it through the shape that we use on our nail form and by the pinching. So if you didn't apply your nail form properly and now you're trying to file basically a big wide flat nail into an almond, you're going to end up with a really ugly shape on the side. For example, the nail that I have on right now is a round nail. It's pretty flat. It doesn't have a big C curve to it. It's more of a natural shape. If I were to try and file this nail into an almond, it would be extremely ugly. The sides would start to come up really high and I wouldn't have that nice curve. So in order to change this nail into an almond, I really need to chop it down, re-extend with the correct nail form shape, and then this is all going to tuck naturally based on the way that my nail form was to begin with. So it's very important to understand is that you can't just go from flat square into an almond without actually changing the way that your nail form is applied, okay? So I'm going to turn the finger to the side Now I can go in, you know, whichever way you want to do. If you want to do it this way, butter knife style, okay? I want to really be cognizant of where the real sidewall of my nail is and how it goes into the extension. Okay, and I want this to be nice and straight first. Same thing on the other side. I do like to pull back the skin a little bit while I'm working, and I do like to put my finger on top of the nail. That way it's not wiggling and putting pressure on the person's finger. It kind of secures everything and makes it nice for them so they don't feel like their nail is getting a lot of pressure put on it, okay? So same thing as before, we want these to be nice and straight and lined up with the sidewalls of our real nail. And then again, before you start working on this tip, you can see that we're really close to an almond already, except we've got this little rough bit on the end. I like to go through and file the surface of the nail so that I can actually see a nice chalky shape, and I'm not dealing with any optical illusions caused by the reflection on the product. So as you've seen me do before, I'm going to go up one side, across the cuticle area, and down the other, leaving the apex alone. The goal here is to really refine, if I show you guys down the barrel, I really want to refine these sides. Okay, so I really want to keep the height here in the center is the important part that creates that dome shape, that creates a lot of strength, in addition to the C-curve, obviously, that we did with our nail form. But what I'm doing is when I file, I really want this to be thin and then crescendo into the top here in the center. And then as I go down the side, I want it to be thin on the sidewall as well. You can see that most of that was achieved already by the way that I applied my product. If you guys can see that, see how it's already thin on the sides and thick in the center. But as I'm filing, I also keep that in mind. So when I'm filing here, I file side and then I kind of gradually come up at an angle so that everything comes up into the center. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. It's hard to see that when people are filing. It's like, it looks like it's just magic that it comes out, but really when you're filing, there is an angle to everything so that you're achieving what you want by the end of it. You don't just go in and start blindly filing on stuff. Okay, and gently across the cuticle area and then down. And then when I come to this side, I do usually like to turn the hand all the way over so I can work here. You can even overhand hold it like this. Whichever you prefer, whichever feels the most comfortable for you. Okay, come down. And then as you get to the edges, really start to angle your file back a little bit so that this gets really nice and thin. Okay, so I did all the way around. Then I'm going to come across the top. And as you guys have seen me do in previous videos, what I'm doing here is I'm leaving this apex piece and I'm lining up my nail file right about there so that everything comes down towards the tip of the nail, and I rock it back and forth so that this really becomes nice and smooth towards the tip of the nail, and this apex area basically gets left alone. With a fake hand, it's a little bit more difficult because you can't quite get the angle that I want, but I'm going to try. Okay, pretty dang close. And then last but not least, you can go through that light apex area just lightly and then remove the natural shine so you can see what you're working with here. Okay, so by the end of it, we should have nice streamlined sidewalls that go right out from the real nail out to the extension. From the side view, we should also have nice sidewalls that meet up. I could take this up just a little bit. I'm gonna use an emery board for that so I can get nice and tight in there. And you can go back and make final adjustments on any areas that you might have missed. But really we want this to completely line up. No notches in the side of it. You can see that this comes to like a nice, almost almond shape. And then the last piece is going to be the tip. So the tip part, it is kind of a refinement where you just kind of come across a little bit at a time. I usually kind of file everything into a V and then round everything out gradually. And I do like to look underneath and like line up the sidewalls at the same time. Now, depending on how much of an almond you like, if you like it really narrow, you can do it this narrow. If you like it wider, you can absolutely do it wider, and I would adjust that based on my nail form. So if you don't want such a pinched C curve, you don't have to have one. And then at the very end, I do like to refine the tip a little bit more so it's not so thick, and just make sure everything is super, super thin towards the free edge of the nail that I'm creating. With almond, it is like a little bit at a time, so you just kind of look at it, make sure it's straight, and then also don't forget to turn the hand around while you're working and look at it and make sure that everything lines up. So if you need to like adjust, like maybe the center of your almond is not quite center, so turn it around and just a little bit at a time, really lightly, okay, until you're happy with it. Almond probably takes the most finessing out of all of the shapes because you just want to get that nice almond shape. And I do usually refine it right after I apply all the color as well. So right at the very, very end, I do refine it one more time. Okay, there you have it. There's our almond nail. Now lastly, before I put color on, I do like to take a manicure brush and just scrub everything. You can also put a little bit of rubbing alcohol on here if you want to just clean it one last time. But it's a good idea to just scrub everything right before you put your product on, before you put your color in your top coat, just to get any grit and you know, fuzz or whatever off. And I do like using manicure brushes because it doesn't have any fuzz or lint, so I'm able to do that without leaving any fuzz on the surface of my nail, okay? Now, a lot of you guys were asking me about French, if you wanted to do French. If I was going to do French on this nail, I would put one more coat of either like my same clear builder gel that I used, or a base coat that matches the color that I'm going to use. You could put a clear layer to smooth this out before you put your French on. And if you're going to do something that's like, let's say it's a clear nail, like you're going to do a glass type nail, or you're going to do clear nail art, I do also like to use a primer or like a bonder, something sticky that kind of sinks in, like this one is one, or for example, you know, Light Elegance tack is one, something like that. Protein Bond by Young Nails, you can use Protein Bond. But what this does is when I put it on here, it's actually a sticky kind of bonder, but I like these kind of bonders. If I'm going to do a clear nail, I actually put this down because what it does is it sinks into all the cracks and all the little lines from me filing, and it's going to make this perfectly glass clear again before I put my product on. So that's just one little technique. If you guys are going to do glass nails, you'll get rid of some of that fogginess if you put a bonder down first that kind of sinks into all those little nooks and crannies. But you don't have to do this. If you're just going to go in with solid color, you absolutely do not have to do that. You can just go in straight on the 180 grit. Like you've seen me do in my previous videos, you can put your color right on the finished filed gel. But if you're going to do French, paint on French, which I prefer paint on French so that I can just file that off and keep the actual nail underneath and keep swapping whatever it is, then I do put a base layer here so that all this gel is perfectly smooth. That way when I put my white on, I'm not going to have the white sinking into the little cracks and scratches that are on the surface of this nail, okay? And then if I'm going to do all one color clear, I'm going to do all one color glass, whatever it is, like a glass color that's kind of a see-through translucent color, then I like to use a bonder so that it sinks into the cracks and then you're not going to see any of those marks when you go to put your color on. So for this nail, I'm going to use DG2, kind of like a gray color. Dark gray. This is really pretty. It's like elephant gray. Okay. And I am going to start about halfway down the nail. Paint the tip first. I do like to wrap, as I'm painting longer nails, I like to actually wrap the bristles of my brush. I wrap the bristles of my brush right around the edges. That way all of the edges get coated. You don't have any like bare edges on the side. and you can even do a little bit on the tip as you're painting. And then I go back and I put a little bit more product on my brush, and now I can do the cuticle area, and everything's going to glide really nicely. As you get closer to the cuticle area, tip your brush up ever so slightly, get some product in front of your brush, bulldoze it up close to the cuticle without touching, and just slowly just sit there for a second, and the gel will kind of flow into place, okay? So if you push some product in front of your brush, just go really close and just stop for a second. It will actually flow backwards into the cuticle area, and it'll get even closer without you having to do anything. And then tip the finger to the side so you can see. And then just make sure everything is nice and smooth before you cure it. And if you get a little bit of grit or something in there, usually you can just flick that out before you cure. Okay, now I'm going to do my second coat of color. Again, same thing, get the tip wet with the product so that it's easier to glide your brush downward. Wrap your brush around the edges. This coat doesn't have to be as perfect. I mean, I usually use the second coat to just kind of make sure everything's nice and opaque and close, and all the lines around the cuticle and the sidewalls are nice and clean. Okay. And then just a couple kind of touch pulls. Right? And then last but not least, as we're working, always check your free edge. Make sure that nothing's getting built up on the tip of the nail, and then you can go ahead and cure that. All right, last but not least, we're going to put top coat on. I am using the basic top gel from Estemio, and it's the one that's like solid black with a shiny lid. Same thing, start towards the bottom half. That way if you have too much product on your brush, and then you can kind of float everything, make sure everything's really nice. Give your top coat a second to self-level also, you know what I mean? Like, top coat is meant to be something that kind of self-levels and gives you nice high gloss. So don't rush your application with your top coat. And you can also perfect anything that's bugging you on here. If you have any little divots or anything like that, you can fill that in with some of your top coat as well. All right, guys, there you have it, our finished almond nail. Again, from the side, the almond nail still lines up with the real sidewall of the real nail and extends out. It slightly goes upward into a nice refined tip. And we also have our apex that blends into the tip as well. So just because it has a pointy shape doesn't mean that it loses any of its character or somehow doesn't line up on the sidewalls. And you also want to take into consideration that the C curve is really important. So the way that we applied our nail form has a lot to do with how this nail turned out. As I mentioned earlier, if you try to go from a super flat nail or a round nail or a square nail into this shape, it just doesn't work out. You really need to shorten everything down, restructure it, put that form on properly, and re-sculpt an almond nail. But this is how I do almond nails. Some people like them to flare out more on the side. Some of them like to be pointier. Some of them like to be rounder. But I like almond nails like this, and I find that they are very, very strong, very beautiful, and they also slenderize the hand as well. So I hope you guys really are encouraged to try this out. Try out doing an almond nail, and I'll be in touch again next time with another video. Bye!